Here we are, starting a brand new book of the Torah. It's the book of Shemot, which is names in Hebrew. If you have the Green Women's Torah commentary, it begins on page 307. It is Exodus 1:1, with whatever Torah commentary you might have. And it's a fundamental shift from the Genesis narrative, which is the beginnings of our people, the beginnings of the world. As we mentioned last week, Genesis starts with the creation of the universe, then the creation of this world, the creation of human beings, ultimately the human story. The human story quickly devolves into the Jewish story, the story of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and Sarah, and Rebekah, and Rachel, and Leah, our collective ancestors, that led up to last week's grand conclusion of the death of Jacob, our last patriarch, gathering all of his children and the two grandchildren that he adopted around him, giving them his version of kind of blessings, so to speak, or at least last words, and the beginnings of and the creation of, as I would put it, the Jewish people, from the creation of the world to the creation of the Jewish people. And then the rest of the Torah, and this book, Exodus, named Exodus for its theme, which is Exodus, getting out of Egypt, but Shemot in Hebrew because, as you know, every portion, every book in Hebrew is named for the first significant word in that portion, and the first significant word in this book is Shemot. Elah Shemot B'nai Yisrael. These are the names of the children of Israel, Habaim Mitzrayim, who came to Egypt. And then there's the story and then the listing of their names in the beginning. So a couple things I want to point out before we jump in. Although when we jump in, we're going to jump in with the famous sentence on verse 8. So if you just turn the page, if you're in the Green Book, the next page. What I'm going to point out for a couple of minutes are two sort of themes here. The theme of listening and hearing, and the theme of knowing. Knowing, and how do you know? How do you know someone? What does it mean to say you know someone? What does it mean to not know somebody? What are the implications, and how do we get to know somebody? How do we know the people that we know? What is it that tells us who they are? And that's linked to last week's Torah portion, in my mind, because that's linked to the idea of legacy. So, for you. And there's books over here. So I'll just ask you, how do you know? If you say, oh, I know that person, or if you say, I don't know that person, what does that mean? Where does that come from? Yeah.
I think there's a difference between I've met that person, or I know who they are, I know them, I know their soul, I know their character.
So knowing them isn't just, I've met them. That's like, I can recognize who that person is, but you say you know somebody, the implication is something deeper than that. Yeah?
Part of it's intuition. You have a sense that somebody is...
I really know that person. Yeah?
Part of it is their actions.
Yeah, how are we known? How is...
By what we do and what we say. Mostly what we do.
You've heard this before. Every time we do baby namings, we give a baby a new name. One of the little things that rabbis tend to say when they're doing baby namings is Jewish tradition teaches us each of us has at least 3 names. It's a good midrash from Jewish tradition. The name our parents give us, the name our friends call us, and the name that we earn for ourselves in the world. And then we go on with great eloquence to say, the most important name is the name that we earn for ourselves in the world, and that our blessing and our prayer for this child as we give him or her this name is that the name that they will create for themselves in the world will be a name that will bring a source of joy and pride to them, their parents, their families, the world, etc. That's how we know people, by the name that we create for ourselves. Yeah.
If I may
Judith,
give you just a
you may.
personal example. My parents named me Judith,
Yes.
having no idea what it meant. In a rural Texas atmosphere, they named me Judith, which means Jewish woman. And so all those
Name is destiny.
Yes, it was. And then all the years that I was growing up, I was Judy.
Uh-huh.
And my father was named Judy. He was Julius, but everyone called him Judy. He was 6'6", and no one smiled when they said Judy. He was big Judy, I was little Judy. And then after I left home,
Cute.
I became Judith. I wanted my name because of what it meant. So those 3 stages passed through my life, and I'm so happy my parents named me Judith.
There we go.
Might have named me Maria had they known.
Right.
I was known.
Yes.
Hey, you.
Or Christine. I won't even tell you what I was known as when I was little.
Names are very significant.
Names are powerful. Well, many of us have had lots of names in the course of our lives,
Names too.
reflecting different things, good names, bad names, name calling. We're currently growing up and living through an era of high-level name calling.
Right.
Not to call anyone out, but you all know that, that's just part of the public dialogue at the moment. Conversation is that somehow it's okay to call people names.
We sure call it low level.
Yeah, right. And to see what kind of impact that might have on society as a whole, or on kids growing up, or, running out of chairs. So...
I think she sees this one. There's a chair here.
Is your,
Oh.
it's got your name on it, maybe. So, we're mostly known by what we do, and one of the most powerful emotional needs that people have is to be seen, that is, and to be heard, that is, to feel like they exist. How do kids literally know that they exist? It's by the reactions that they get from other human beings. And the most devastating thing you can do to a child is not hit them, but ignore them, right? Or any of us as adults as well. How many relationships break down because you feel like, he's just not listening to me, or she doesn't hear me, or, it's like, it's the bread and butter of every therapist, I think. The whole idea of who's listening, being heard, being acknowledged, not being acknowledged, and all the things that we do to be acknowledged, putting our names on things and building buildings and doing stuff so someone will notice, here I am, kind of thing. How do you see me? I haven't got my name on that thing over there. The lengths to which we go to be seen, heard, and known. This portion is constantly someone saw, someone heard, someone didn't hear, someone didn't know, that ends up directing our destiny as a people. Beginning with verse 8 of chapter 1 of the book of Exodus, which is one of the most famous lines in the whole Torah, which is... I think it's fine for you to share, but just in case. Which is, a new king arose over Egypt who did not know Joseph. Right? Vayakam melech chadash al Mitzrayim asher lo yada et Yosef. A new king arose. It becomes a metaphor throughout history, of what happens in the real world. You do whatever you do, and suddenly you're the Emeritus. No, I didn't mean that. you do whatever you do, and Right? I have a men's group. A couple of the people in the room are in it. I have a men sort of in transition group, mostly people around my age or older or slightly younger, people in transition or people who have retired, whatever, and we meet once a month. And one of the things that pops up often has in this group of people who have changed a significant change in their life at significant stages, this stage of their life, is this sense that a new king arose in their life. We didn't know them from whatever their work was or whatever their job is, and the need to create a new presence and a new identity as a result of that. To be known, what are you going to be known as now when you don't go to the office anymore? The same one, with the same people. So who are you now when that's, and those issues of identity and being heard and being seen and being known are huge at every stage of our lives. It's the children growing up and what we, I think, technically call individuation, trying to separate from their parents and create their own identity, and all the different ways we do that, positive and negative. He's the troublemaker, or he's the clown, or she's the this, or she's the that, or he's the that, or what are you known by? Don't do that, because then that's what you're going to be known forever by. And today, it's forever. I don't have my phone with me, but just the other day, somebody sent my wife a picture of her they found on the internet from long before I knew her. We've been married 35 years, whatever. Been together 37 years. It's a big chunk of her life. Things that she had no idea. Where'd this picture come from? She said, I haven't seen this picture in 45 years. Somebody, somewhere on the internet, somebody found, because God only knows, and she won't tell me, how things end up on the internet. All kinds of things. Clips of Dee Dee singing somewhere. Something, whatever. Right? Things forever. Things forever. We used to talk about, when I was a kid, you have to be careful because it'll go on your permanent record. The mythical permanent record that you had to worry about because, someone's going to check it out later. Your permanent record. Now it's true.
It is.
Now there really is a permanent record. Now you really can't escape your past and every dumb thing you might do with somebody going like this and taking a picture of it somewhere, wherever you are. And part of our challenge as educators with kids today is the impossible task, really, of teaching them that, of teaching them that it's like, 1984 has come and Big Brother is watching every second, all the time, and, and it's going to come back to haunt you. And you don't know when, because someone's posting it somewhere and it's there forever. So, this issue of not being known, how could a new king, what does it mean? A new king arose who didn't know Joseph. Like a page before, basically, Joseph was the hero of the country, saved the whole country. How quickly they forget. It's like our reputations, our impact in the world. This is part of Ozymandias, is that famous, thing? What we do comes and goes and crumbles, and we're here, and when we're here, we're the center of our universe, and to us, we're really important and all that. And, we're like that. We're like a shadow. We're like a breath. We're like a passing shadow, says Jewish tradition. Yeah.
There's a terrific essayist, Joe Epstein, who writes in commentary. I remember reading one of his essays about the stages of one's career, and it goes something like this. Who's Steve? Where's Steve? We need another Steve. We need a younger Steve. Who's Steve?
Right. Beautiful. That hurt. Look how fragile we are. Yeah, exactly. And here it has devastating consequences. Being known, not being known, remembered, not being remembered, heard, not being heard, seen, not being seen. All of a sudden we become a threat because we knew not Joseph. Because that's what happens. A new king arose over Egypt who did not know Joseph, and therefore he said to his people, who are these people? These people are scary. These strangers, these others that are suddenly here. It's like, we got to watch out for them. They're going to become too numerous, and then they're going to take us over. Right? I didn't get a job once because of that, but that's a different story. It's kind of a good story. So let's deal shrewdly with them so that they may not increase. Otherwise, in the event of war, they may join our enemies in fighting against us. Rise from the ground. This whole notion of us and them, us versus them. Who are we and who are they? And that they're somehow different. And our whole history is based on this perception of us being other. And all of our wanderings, and from generation to generation and town to town and country to country, is shaped by this otherness of us and this struggle back and forth. But it's part of the struggle we're having today in America as American Jews.
It's still here.
Being yes and being no, being other and being not other, and the difference between most of our perceptions of ourselves and suddenly other people's perceptions of us. What do you mean I'm other? There's nothing other about me. I'm a little white boy, grew up in Santa Monica, California, went to public school. How am I other? Oh yeah, then I remember, let's see, those Christmas pageants all the way through my childhood where I felt uncomfortable because I was singing Christmas carols and I kept thinking, this is probably not okay. But there I was, the little drummer boy, because I played drums, so then I was a little, and I remember there were these moments of somehow feeling other. Yeah.
If Joseph is a symbol of the assimilated Jew,
Yes.
which he was, he was dressing Egyptian, whatever.
Got Egyptian name and everything.
Then you can reread the sentence and say the king didn't know assimilated Jews.
Yeah.
Didn't accept that as a possibility.
Right.
And then the sentences around it say, and therefore, no matter what, I don't
You can
care.
try.
You can try, but you're still
And
Jewish.
look at how well you can do, and you can rise to the very
And
top.
you can have a lot of babies.
And you can have and you can be surrounding the king, and you can be the king's right hand. You can even marry into the king's family. I'm not talking about today. You can even marry into the king's family, but push comes to shove, you get pushed and shoved.
So could you say this is the beginning of anti-Semitism?
You
In a shape that we've known it over the
You
years?
just did say that.
Well, you just described
You
it.
could say that, and that's and to me it's a it's an archetypal, if you will, problem of life and of community and why we have war. This is why we have war. This is why we have strife, because as soon as we see the other, then all of a sudden there's fear. If you're Marianne Williamson, life is either about love or fear. Of Course of Miracles, life or fear. This is fear. Fear instantly because I'm not you. The not you, and when you don't see yourself reflected in the other person, then all of a sudden you start looking for, we haven't even done anything. It's not that we've done something. Look, they're too numerous for us, so that they may not increase. Otherwise, they may do this, and they might do that, and they might do that, and they might become a problem, so we better oppress them now in advance. Anticipatory oppression, right? Not because we've done anything. It's not like, look what they're doing. That's the suddenly, I see you as different, and I'm afraid of you.
And
Yeah.
how many could...
I just read a survey, a current survey of what anti-Semites in the United States, what's their number one reason for being anti-Semitic?
Yeah.
And their number one reason is the Jews may take over. And what amazes me is that thousands of years ago, same thing was written.
The more things change, the more they stay the same.
And how many Israelites could there have been?
Really?
Because we just went over there's a list here which we didn't read of who came down. It was
70 came down, and it was 70.
Right.
And then they started
But
to
if there were
grow.
ultimately 600,000.
But we had lots of kids at the time, and we ended up allegedly leaving with 600,000 out of our 70. Yeah.
But what seems interesting is that the king, for some reason, didn't know Joseph, but most everybody else around must have known him, as he was a prominent person in the community.
King didn't want to give him a name.
Well, new king, new boss.
We don't know how.
Yes, I hear it.
And I was at this week. I spoke over at the AJU, did a little thing on my book, which was nice. My brilliant book. Here with Mordecai Kaplan. Anyway, I had this evening. There were about 25 or 30 people there. It was very nice, lovely evening. Which is why I don't have any books because I gave them all away. And the woman who was in charge of the Wizen Institute, which is their the AJU's adult education program, which is really, they always have a wonderful adult education program, who had originally talked to me and made this arrangement. When I got contacted a couple weeks ago in anticipation of going on Wednesday night, and it was a new person saying, Beth is no longer here. I'm Caroline. Caroline is now here, and I'd like to introduce myself, and blah, blah, blah. And she was the one who was there. And so afterwards, lovely person, I said, where did Beth go? And she said...
Who's Beth?
She said, well, we have a new president. Because the AJ got a new president. Great guy. New president this year. And you know what happens when you get a new CEO. Of a new king arose, who did whatever, had to make changes. So this person moved here, that person's out there, this person's taking a different job. Those 10 people, I'm showing you how fiscally responsible I am, so I'm cutting 10 people out of this, and that's, so that's why Beth isn't there anymore, because a new king arose, and boom. It didn't matter, it wasn't that she was incompetent as far as anybody knew. Because I then talked. Yeah.
It seems that this circles back to the first thing you said about no and no. He may have known who George Washington's Secretary of State was, but he didn't know what George Washington's Secretary of State really did. In this situation, maybe he knew the name.
Yeah.
But, didn't have a visceral sense of what he did for the country.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why I said there's different kinds of knowing. Yeah.
I've often wondered whether, from the perspective of the Egyptians here, did they look at Jacob and the tribe as monotheists, and that's why they were different? I mean, there were no such things as Jews. I mean, they were just a tribe, weren't they?
Yeah, they were a family.
Because they
tribe.
prayed differently, or what made them different?
They had different language.
Why were they
different language?
They were shepherds. They were from Canaan. They were foreigners.
But Egypt is just filled with...
You'd think. Egypt was the most cosmopolitan country at the time in the world, right? That's part of the power of the story is, it didn't matter. It didn't matter that Egypt was the center of the universe then and commerce and all that. It didn't matter that how many Jews were in the administration and close to the president or whomever happened to be at the time, or the king or whatever, in every country, because we've had them in every country. We have this story throughout our, there's a moment when this group's expendable because either I'm afraid or I need it for political reasons, So, and we don't know that the Egyptians had any feelings at all about the Israelites. All we know is the king had feelings about the Israelites and decided they're a potential threat. The king wasn't secure, so the king made them the potential scapegoat of anything that was going on.
What was the chant of the white supremacists?
The Jews will not replace us. Right. Jews will not replace us. Yes, we do run the country, don't we? Anyway? Yeah.
You don't have to go here if you don't want to, what I'm going to ask you.
I'm not going there.
Okay.
But no.
There was a rabbi in Los Angeles who made some very controversial statements a number of years ago by basically saying, well, of course this didn't happen.
Oh, yeah.
And we talk about it as if it
happened.
And so I guess my question is, as we get into this whole story,
Yes.
do you think it happened?
Does
And
it-
if it didn't happen, does it matter?
Right.
Stephen Carr, Reuben's take
It's a
on
great question. Does it matter that any of this happened? So does it? Some people it does. Some people it doesn't. To me, it doesn't matter at all. To me, this is our narrative. I mean, what's the narrative what's the Jewish story?
It matters as a lesson.
It's like you're back to the question of where did all this come from, right? There's two versions, two kinds of Jews, two kinds of anybody's actually. It's two versions. You're about to get one in this in a couple of portions. God, the supernatural being who created the world, literally dictated the Torah to Moses, who wrote it all down and brought it down to the people, and the people, being who they are, went whatever, built a calf and things like that. But and then we passed it on from generation to generation. And the beginning of Pirkei Avot, the beginning of the tractate of the Talmud called Avot, says Moshe kibel Torah miSinai. Moses received the Torah from Sinai. He passed it on to the next generation, to Joshua, who passed it on to the elders, who passed it on to the rabbis, who passed it on to us. And here we have it, we, whoever we are at that particular time, a couple thousand years ago, because God literally gave this Torah. And therefore we do what we do as Jews. We light candles on Friday night. We do this mitzvah, these 613 mitzvot, because God said so. It's pretty straightforward, because God did that. You either are in that camp, or you are in the camp that says, this is our sacred text, written by our people, don't know who exactly, wrote this. This is our story, our history, our spiritual history. May or may not be grounded in fact. The chances that all of the people that are quoted in here actually saying those things are about as likely as you going home and quoting me and having it be what I actually said. Or any of those things, because we know that this is like poetry and metaphor, or dreams, as I said a couple of weeks ago. Poetry and metaphor. That when I say I love you with all my heart, people would like to hear that someone loves them with all their heart. But if I say I love you with my muscle pumping blood, it doesn't quite have the same impact. But that's what a heart is. It's a muscle pumping blood. But, you want me to go, I love you with all my heart, sweetie, and then you go, yes, that's what you want, because you know what it means. Because it doesn't mean my muscle pumping blood. And that's what these stories are. They are our story, just like every one of us, back to therapists again, every one of us tells our own story about our own lives. And part of what we do when we want to shift our attitude about life is recognize that, I'm telling this story. What if I tell it a different way? How will that make me feel? I think I'm going to tell this story a different way, a better way. Like I was in therapy the other week, and as a matter of fact, and I was talking about, my life, and my father died, and this happened, and then I went here, moved from Santa Monica, Sacramento when I was 16, in the middle of high school, and all this stuff. And every time you tell this story, there's a therefore attached to each one. And therefore, I felt this way, therefore, I am this way now, therefore. And I remember going, I don't like that version. I'm going to tell a different version. I was born in a family that loved me. My father died, and my sister stepped up and did this, that, and the other. My parents, my family, my mother remarried, and all of a sudden I had a whole different story about my life. It's the same life. I decided, this story is like, I'm always unhappy about that story. I think I'll tell a good story, a better story, a happier story, because that's who I am. You know what I mean? And this is our collective story. This is how we, as a people, chose to write our story, which was unusual, for sure, because how many people write their story and start out by saying, I was a slave, I was a nothing, people oppressed me, I was a piece of dirt, I was like, we did. That's our story. We were slaves, and we went free. And more than any other mitzvah in here, we're commanded to remember that we were slaves, remember the stranger, and that's our story. That's our narrative, right? We chose that narrative. We could have written it, so whoever wrote the Torah could have written any version of all these stories. These are the stories, and this is it. This is the essence. Today starts the essence of the entire narrative of the Jewish people ever since, that we carry with us in every service, at every celebration, every holiday, some version of that joke that everybody's heard. You know, they tried to kill us, we won, let's eat. You know, that's every Jewish holiday and every Jewish story, starting with this. A new king arose who didn't know us, didn't know Joseph, and was afraid of us. You know, why us? Well, you don't get to vote on that. That's the other thing. You learn you don't get to vote on how other people perceive you often, no matter what you do, no matter how high you rise, no matter what good works you do. It's not about that. Jews will not replace us. In fact, it's the opposite, as you said. The more successful you are, the scarier you become suddenly. So, you know, if we were all in poverty, everybody'd be happier. Maybe they'd be less.
Except us.
Except us. Be less anti-Semitism, you know. And every time you're successful, whatever. You had hand up and somebody had hand up and I was ignoring you. Yeah.
You asked a while back what the importance of the lines about a new king arose, knew not Joseph.
Yeah.
Well, you said it didn't matter, but I think it does because we learn from that. And it has happened over and over again, and we're still here. And that's the lesson. So
it's a good lesson.
In case anybody forgot it, we get to hear it again.
It's a good lesson. Yeah, you know, one of the things that I often have said to people who are concerned about our current state of affairs in America, try to say this right, is that I have as a rabbi, one of the privileges that I have experienced as a rabbi is to be steeped in Jewish history and Jewish tradition. And the blessing of that is we're old. In fact, it's one of the reasons that people who convert to Judaism often tell me is attractive about Judaism is it's old. That is, it's been around for thousands of years. Must be something good in here. They said that often that got them looking into it in the first place. Must be something there if it's still around after thousands of years. And so what I often tell people is, as Jews, we have this really, 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 really long history, thousands of years. And, you know, with all the imagery that I said a couple weeks ago, that the EKG thing of our lives, that this is what life is. As Jews, we've been kicked out of like every country in the world practically at one point or another, and here we are, we're still here. You know, and the joke is the joke that I told a moment ago, and our holidays are our holidays because that is our collective experience. Not just that we were slaves, but we've been slaved, and we've been enslaved, and we've had expulsions, and we've had Holocaust, and we've had, you know, Nazis and neo-Nazis and white supremacists and whatever they want to call themselves, and in every country, in every generation. And in fact, that's part of our liturgy. It says, B'chol dor v'dor, and Passover Agada. In every generation, they rise up against us to destroy us. Literally, it's part of our prayer, the liturgy of the holiday. It's like, this is how we see ourselves. In every generation, this is this version of the story. In every generation, they rise up against us, and with a strong, but this is about faith. Biyad chazaka ubezro netuya, with a strong hand and outstretched arm, somehow God redeems us. That is, we're redeemed. We have redemption. We're still around. That's this story. It's about our relationship with the divine. However you understand it, in this case, it's literally God hearing which is where I started before. The primary Jewish mitzvah of life is the Shema. Right? It's like our number one prayer. Listen, hear, Shema Yisrael. Shema Yisrael. Hear, because it's one of the ways that you recognize what's going on, positive and negative in the world, to pay attention. Here we have a story where, in a moment, I'm actually going to turn there, where, when Moses encounters the burning bush, which is what I picked from my own Torah commentary, that moment, it's God, it says, heard the cries of the Israelites. Really, where's God been for the last 200 years of slavery or whatever? Suddenly God hears their cries and goes, and remembers, I made this promise to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel. I better keep my promise.
Maybe got a hearing aid.
And get him out of there. Yes, exactly. And by the way, I think I mentioned maybe last week, but the rabbis in the Midrash say there were 4 reasons that why the Israelites merited redemption from slavery. Right? There's a couple different versions of these 4 reasons, but essentially they asked, what did they do? What did we do during our hundreds of years of enslavement, because it's allegedly hundreds of years of enslavement, to merit God waking up and going, I guess I better redeem them, bless you. And the 4 things have to do with our identity and keeping our identity in a foreign country. The first one was they kept their Hebrew names. The power of names. That instead, here, what do we learn about Joseph? He instantly got an Egyptian name, and yet the fact that our ancestors kept giving Hebrew names to their children, even though they were living in a foreign country, and they weren't called Brad and Mary and Violet and Maria and Christian and all the things. They were called Yaakov and Joseph and whatever. They kept their Hebrew names. And the second one was they didn't inform on each other. I love this thing. This is what the rabbi said in the Midrash. The second thing that we did as slaves that merited redemption was they didn't inform on each other. What do they mean? Oh, here. Next thing. The king's book of Egypt spoke, I'm at 15, after we ruthlessly imposed. The king of Egypt spoke to the Hebrew midwives. One of them was named Shifra, the other Puah. Because you have to read this, because of course Midrash it's because of the merit of women that we got redeemed in the first place. And here are all these lists of women after woman after woman after woman who was responsible for our redemption, beginning with Shifra and Puah, saying, when you deliver the Hebrew women, look at the birth stool. If it's a boy, kill him. If it's a girl, let her live. The midwives, fearing God, didn't listen to the king, didn't do as the king of Egypt had told them, and let the boys live. So the king of Egypt summoned the midwives and said to them, why have you done this thing, letting the boys live? And the midwives say, not our fault. We're not doing anything. The midwife said to Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women. They're vigorous. Before we even get there, before the midwife can even get there, they've already given birth. They're out in the fields dropping babies like flies. And God dwelt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and increased greatly. And God established households for the midwives because they feared God. Right? Then Pharaoh charged all of his people, saying, every boy that's born you shall throw into the Nile, but let every girl live. Okay, so they gave Hebrew names. They didn't inform on each other, meaning when they had a boy, they didn't tell anybody. They did what they could, like Underground Railroad and all that. They did what they could to protect each other. This is all about, again, community, keeping your sense of community, and not ultimately assimilating and disappearing into that culture and becoming different. And the third thing that the rabbis say in that midrash is that they didn't adopt what they called Egyptian immorality, which they didn't explain, but had to do with they didn't adopt Egyptian cultic sexual practices and things like that, of which there were. And the fourth thing was they kept the Hebrew language. Kept the Hebrew language. They kept their own unique people's language. You know, when you say mitzvah, it's not the same as saying, I don't know, a good deed, a religious obligation, or whatever you can say in English. It's not mitzvah. It doesn't have the feel, doesn't have the communication of mitzvah. Hebrew language, it communicates. They're over there. The Torah. There's a Torah back there. The Torah is in Hebrew. Our legacy is in Hebrew. It starts in Hebrew. These words, all the names for God, the names for hearing, the names Shema, Yisrael, Adonai, Eloheinu, Adonai, Hebrew. It evokes something. People go and visit around the world, and they show up at some synagogue in Rome or some synagogue in Barcelona, and they hear Shema Yisrael, and they go, oh, I'm home on some level, if they grew up in any synagogue life anywhere. Reform, conservative, Reconstructionist, Orthodox, doesn't matter. You go somewhere, you hear that, it's different than anything else. Some connection. And because they kept the Hebrew language alive, say the rabbis, all of those things reflected both our otherness, which became a liability, and the strength. You know me, I'm always talking about blessings and curses, and you can't tell which is which, and some things are both. Blessings and curses. Keeping our identity is a blessing and a curse at the same time. It's Jews will not replace us. It's neo-Nazis. It's white supremacists. It's whatever, you know, and it's kept us alive for all these thousands of years. So, I want you to turn to this. Chapter 3. I'm just skipping down to, you know the story anyway. Moses ends up, you know.
3:1?
3, the very beginning of 3. Chapter 3. 3:14 if you're in the Green Book. Okay. And you know, Moses grows up in the palace just like Joseph, just like Joseph's kids. Moses grows up, adopted by Pharaoh's daughter, who calls him Moshe. By the way, Moshe is made up of 3 Hebrew letters, Mem, Shin, Hey. Who is Moshe? Moshe is our Redeemer, right? Moshe is the guy. If you reverse them, Hashem. The other way means Hashem, which is one of the names of God. The name. Just saying. Just saying. Just for the fun of it. Very cool. What?
It can also be Shema.
It can be different word spelling for Shema, but because Shema has an ayin in it. But yeah, Hashem, I love that. Anyway, so Moses, of course, who, in spite of the fact that, how did he even know who he was? How did he know that he was a Hebrew?
He had a witness.
Well, he had a witness that was his mother, right? But you know, when he stops nursing, she takes him adopts him as Pharaoh's daughter adopts him. And, oh, by the way, how did she know, how did he get rescued? I know I'm going back, but what happened here? The daughter of Pharaoh, I'm back on second chapter. Daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe while her maidens walked on the log. She spied the basket that he was in, that his mother put him in, that his sister Miriam was watching. Why? She spied the basket, sent her slave to fetch it. She opened it. She saw that it was a child, a boy, crying. And so the rabbis point out, she only was attracted to that basket because she heard the child crying. Yishma. Shema. She heard his cry and went, oh, go get that. What is in there? What is that? And that's the hearing or not hearing is our redemption. So anyway, back. So Moses
said this must be a Hebrew child.
And said must be a Hebrew child. How did she know that? Let's see. Oh,
Was he circumcised?
Was he circumcised? Didn't say, but what'd you say? Because he was a basket case. He was a basket case? Yes. Maybe it was the Brit Milah that she saw. All we know is, so he goes up in the palace, and yet it says he went out to see his kinspeople, and he sees a taskmaster oppressing somebody, and he kills him. And then, I know I keep going back, but it's so interesting. Must be Moses has grown up. He went out to his kinsfolk, witnessed their labor, saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew. I just went back to verse 11. He turned this way and that, seeing no one about, struck the Egyptian, killed him, hit him in the sand. Then he went out the next day, found 2 Hebrews fighting. So he said, why do you strike your fellow? And the guy said, look who's talking. Basically, who made you chief and ruler over us? Do you mean to kill us like you killed the Egyptian? Ooh. Moses was frightened. Why?
He thought no one saw him.
Because the matter is known. A new king arose over Egypt who knew not Joseph. All of a sudden, he knows Moses.
Yeah.
Everybody knows Moses. Not in a way Moses is happy about. He's like on the internet already. Somebody posted that. It's his permanent record. He's screwed. So when Pharaoh learned of the matter, Pharaoh, this is his grandson, right? His adopted grandson, just goes to show. His adopted grandson, when Pharaoh learned of it, knew of it.
The only people who could have told Pharaoh.
Oh, by the way,
Hebrews.
It says, Vayishma Pharaoh et hadavar. When Pharaoh heard about this, he sought to kill Moses. Which is why Moses ran away. This story keeps being the same over and over again. All right, anyway. Moses runs away, marries Zipporah, and becomes a shepherd. Now, verse 3, chapter 3. Moses tending the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian. Another one of those famous interfaith marriages. Moses marries the daughter of a Midianite priest, like Joseph married the daughter of an Egyptian priest. We're big on priests' daughters. Drove the flock into the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. An angel of Adonai appeared to him in a blazing fire out of a bush. He gazed, and there was a bush all aflame, yet the bush was not consumed. Moses said, this is interesting. Moses said, I must turn aside to look at this marvelous sight. Why doesn't the bush burn up? When Adonai saw that he had turned aside to look, that's what I quoted. When Adonai saw that he turned aside to look, God called him out of the bush, Moses, Moses, and he answered like every good prophet does, Hineni. Like every good prophet, he says, here I am. I'm showing up. Okay. Love this story. It's reflected on the ark behind you. It's reflected, which is a reflection of our ark that's in the sanctuary, our poor ark in the sanctuary, that is the burning bush, and the revelation, the Torah sort of coming out of the burning bush. It's our symbol, iconic symbol of revelation, is this burning bush. To me, it's always been one of the most fascinating stories in the whole Torah, because here's Moses, because I've always asked myself, how long do you have to look at a bush that's burning, some bush, before you figure it out, it's burning but not being consumed? What the hell does that even mean? Like, literally, how would you know that? How do you... Well, he immediately saw that. And this is when Adonai saw. When does God speak to him? God's God.
After Moses engaged.
God could talk to whoever God wants to anytime. Talk to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, several times, right? Only when Moses demonstrated his own perception. Yeah.
I have my notes from last time, but I had written that this was the original test that God gave Moses, and because Moses had the ability to pay attention and not panic and was furious. That was God, the original test that began the partnership. That's
Yep.
at least how I understand it.
100%. It's only when God saw that Moses turned aside. Look, think about your own lives and your own relationships, and for many of us, some of the most important relationships in our lives. How did we end up with that person or that relationship? What was it that gave us a sense of connection, knowingness that we were willing to spend time with this person, or whatever? Some just sort of pass in the night. Some suddenly you're drawn to. What is it? And that person has to be willing to be a hineni in your life and stop too and go, oh, here. It's the thing that drives me crazy about my wife. Right? Here's what drives me crazy about Dee Dee. It takes an hour to cross the street with her. You may notice, go, so nice to see you. Dee Dee goes, okay, so, and it's like, honey, because she is 100% present. I'm hardly ever 100% present. She's like right there with everybody. Drag her away. She's like, lives this hineni life kind of all the time with just the nature of relationships. Much better than I am. But it's the willingness to show up. It's showing up. I say that all the time because all of us do. What's impactful? When I retired as the senior and became the emeritus, I got lots of these wonderful letters from people about whatever things that relationship that I've had over the last, at the time, 28 years. No, 33 years. And really, I don't know if anybody quoted my brilliant sermons and said, I'll never forget when you said so-and-so. Some people did. And most of the time those were, I was sure I never said that, but, I remember when you said so-and-so, and I went, okay, as long as it worked. But most of the time, the things that people said that were impactful in their life was, and you were there. This happened and you were there. That happened and you were there. That happened and you were there. Someone was sick, whatever, born, sick, died, healthy, married, bar mitzvah, whatever, and you were there. It's like showing up. It's about showing up for people. Us, you, showing up. That's what matters. And all of the prophecies of all the prophets and the relationships of those people who made a powerful difference in the life of our people were because, reluctant or not, and the reluctance was part of it, because that's human nature. Here Moses is arguing back and forth, not me. God says, I got a job for you. And Moses says, nah, not really. I don't really want that job. No, you don't get to vote on it. It's your job. I can't. I don't speak well, blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, I'll send your brother along with you. But then it's always Moses is saying everything anyway, by the way. It's like, when does Aaron ever talk? It's always Moses talking. But, having his brother there maybe gave him the strength or gave him the confidence or what have you. He wasn't alone. And this whole conversation between Moses and God now, which we're not going to get to, but you can read on your own, is about to be, they're not going to listen to me. Why should they listen to me? And God going, well, no, they'll listen to you. They didn't really listen to him for a long time, but Moses going there. And then Pharaoh's not going to, why should Pharaoh listen to me? It's all about listening and hearing. Why should Pharaoh listen to me? Well, pick up your staff. I'm going to do little miracles. I'm going to do all this magic stuff. We're going to have, frogs and blood and snakes and boils and all this stuff. Don't worry. They'll listen to you. Ultimately, they'll listen to you. But that's the drama back and forth of, what do you have to do to be heard? What do you have to do to be seen? What do you have to do to have what you do matter? Because ultimately, those are our underlying themes, is how do you act in a way that matters, that brings more holiness into the world. That you become, as Moses is here, a partner with God, a partner with the divine, and the voice of the divine, not just Moses, but you become God. You are God's representative to the other fake God, which is Pharaoh, because Pharaoh thought he was God, right? That was part of the whole Egyptian mythology and theology, is that Pharaoh was God incarnate. Christianity wasn't the first version of having a human beings be God on earth. It was popular to want to have somebody be God on earth. Well, Moses was our version of God, even though that part of what sets us apart is Moses knew he wasn't God, didn't pretend to be God, but was God's spokesperson. How does God work? There may have been all those miraculous things going on, but it was Moses who had to lead everybody out. God didn't appear with a flaming, sword and lead the people across the desert for 40 years. Moses had to schlep. I say it all the time for 38 years. These are God's hands. These are God's eyes. These are God's legs. This is how God works, by what we do.